Good evening, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service. You're watching Alaska Weather with us on this 27th of January. As always, we encourage you to stay up to date with your local weather information, and you can do that a lot of easy ways. One of them is the Alaska Weather Information Line. 1-800-472-0391 is your toll-free call anywhere in Alaska. Punch that number in and listen for the weather prompts that'll help you find your local forecast information, watches, warnings, and advisories included there, as well as current conditions. And write those numbers down. You can get to it a lot faster if you just punch those in next time. You don't have to wait for the weather prompts. As always, our information is online at weather.gov/Alaska or on your mobile device there or your tablet, mobile.weather.gov. Look that up, type in your location. So let's say Galvin, AK. And then once that page loads up, share that to your home screen and it acts just like your own personal weather app. And you can add in a lot of other locations as well. If you can't find what you're looking for, hit me up on email, david.snider@noaa.gov. It is my pleasure to serve you any way I possibly can and help you find the weather resources that you need. Let's take a look at the weather coming back into northern parts of Southeast. And if you're saying, we just had snow, you're talking about the last storm. No, we're talking about another storm coming in tonight and into tomorrow. 24 hours of more snow in all of your favorite places in northern Southeast. Haines, Skagway, White Pass, Chilkat River Bridge out toward Haines Customs. We're talking about 12 to 24 inches of snow easily, it looks like, with this setup here. So a winter storm warning has been issued by the Weather Forecast Office there in Juneau for Haines and Skagway and the Klondike Highway up to White Pass. Looks like this will start up a little bit more tomorrow evening and into Wednesday. And as we do that, heavy snow will probably build in quickly to the region with that south wind, cold air in place, and all of that pushing up the mountains fairly quickly. We could also see wind gusts on the order of 50 to 60 miles per hour, and all of that combined could make for a miserable travel experience. So be extra careful out there and plan ahead. But here are some of the numbers our friends in Juneau are talking about. Anywhere from about 13 to 15 inches from Skagway up toward White Pass. Haines to the Chilkat River Bridge and out toward the Customs area could see anywhere from about 15 inches to almost 26 inches of snow. So the heaviest will probably be on the Haines side this time around. But that winter storm warning again starts up tomorrow night and then goes into Wednesday for about 24 hours there of potential for some heavy snow and certainly some heavy wind in the area. But wait, there's more. Across the central and southern parts of Southeast, it looks like winds will be coming in. We've got a pretty large low here that's been deepening. If you've been watching the weather for the last few days, this is no surprise. But this low has been deepening out here as we get into tomorrow afternoon, and it looks like the winds across central and southern parts of Southeast will come up just as strong as what we'll see in the north, but you're not expecting to see the snow part of this weather event in central and southern parts of the Panhandle. So south of Sitka, all along the outer coast, Craig and Klawock, and also inside of Clarence Strait, Ketchikan and Nanette, and many of our friends all the way up to just about Petersburg, really, you're looking at the potential for some pretty steady winds out of the southeast, 25 to 35, which doesn't sound so bad. But the gusts are what's going to be strong about this. Those could be up to 60 miles per hour again. So a high wind warning has been posted for your area. That again will be Tuesday evening into Wednesday morning. So plan on some strong winds in central and southern parts of Southeast, wind and snow in the north, and a winter weather advisory continues right now for Yakutat as snow continues to fall in the region. A lot going on there. We're also watching, again, blizzard conditions that'll probably ease up there around the Thompson Pass area. So plan on improving conditions for Thompson Pass, but this could be reissued again as we head into tomorrow afternoon and evening with more wind passing through the area. And we're also watching Kodiak Island. As we get into tomorrow and Wednesday, the setup looks to be possible for some heavy snow and some wind. Sounds like blizzard conditions there, and could sound just like a very heavy, wet snow passing through like last time. It's right on the line between being a kind of a big, nasty snowstorm or just kind of a rainy, wet snow that is a little more typical for Kodiak. So watch this. Right now, it's the preliminary alert. Watch means watch out. There's more information coming, and get prepared in case it gets worse. So be prepared for that. As we look up north, there's a lot of yellow on the map. This is a wind chill advisory that's just plastered all the way across the southern Brooks Range, the interior out toward Tanana, as well as the areas around Healy, Denali National Park, the eastern Alaska Range. range, especially the passes there, and all the way through Norton Sound and parts of our southwestern coast and into the Kobuk and Noatak valleys. One exception to that, we have a winter weather advisory here for the south-facing slopes of the Brooks Range, which does include Arctic Village, and that's mainly for blowing snow. So visibility will be poor, but the wind chill will also apply there. We're looking at values for all of these areas shaded in yellow that could reach at least 45 below, maybe even worse at times. And some of that spreads inland a little bit up toward Bethel and maybe even to Antioch, where we don't have an advisory right now. So don't rely on this entirely. Just go by the fact that it is cold. The wind's going to be blowing. That means it's going to be a lot colder. Up across the north, you see a few areas in red, the eastern Beaufort Seacoast, as well as the north and eastern slopes of the Brooks Range, looking at wind chill warnings. That means those values could feel as cold as 55, maybe even 60 below. Dangerous stuff. Frostbite happens in about 10 minutes or less in those conditions. So make sure you have a plan if you have to go out. If you don't have to go out, don't go. And if you are going, make sure someone knows you're on the way. Make sure someone knows you left, and have a plan to get picked up in case something doesn't go the way you expect. Once again, wind chill advisories for parts of Southwest. That'll go tonight and into tomorrow, and really expect these to be renewed at least until the midweek and before our pattern changes maybe just a little bit. Here's a look at the satellite picture. A couple fun things to show you today. First of all, we have this wave of low pressure working just south of the Kenai Fjords region of the Kenai Peninsula and east of Kodiak Island. That's what's bringing those brief rounds of sunshine and snow squalls through south central. They're not that bad, but heavy flurry perhaps across the region. That will clear up fairly quickly. The big weather maker is still just off the map and developing. It will gradually move northward tonight and into tomorrow, and you'll see that on the forecast maps in just a minute. The remnants of the last one of these working through northern parts of southeast right now, and again a little bit of that snow still working its way through Yakutat. Out across the west, if you look carefully here from St. Lawrence Island out towards St. Matthew and then down to St. Paul, you can see these streaks stretching out, these fingers of clouds. Watch what happens and how this changes here in the loop, and you'll notice part of that isn't moving. That is the ice edge there from just about St. Matthew to just south of Nunivak Island, and almost, well, not quite to St. Paul, but it's certainly getting there and growing in that general direction. The ice is also seen all the way into parts of Bristol Bay. No surprise if you've been watching the trends on the ice map, and we'll have an update for you with AKwx back here in just a little bit with the marine weather forecast. As you look at the interior, not a whole lot of cloud cover across the west. Certainly that northerly flow is ruling the weather picture there with that cold and dry air, and again, a lot of that is moving, making you feel tremendously colder than it actually is, but it's already cold enough. Some of those temperatures out there in that 30 to 40 degree below range. Here's a look at the map now. High pressure's in charge in the north. Again, no surprise if you've been watching the weather. We're looking at readings that are about 1020 to 1030 plus there. A little bit weaker across the northern parts of the Yukon. Out across the Copper River Valley, the eastern Alaska Range, a few pockets of snow there, but primarily it's wind that we're dealing with on the west side and wetter, cold across the Copper River Valley and northern Gulf Coast. And then rain for many sections for the central, even northern parts of southeast right now, is a little bit of a surge of warmer air is kind of being flushed into the region. As we look toward tonight, low pressure is still sitting just south of the Kenai Peninsula at 993 millibars. You'll notice that change starting to take place again around Haines and Skagway and just about down to Juneau. Pockets of rain and snow showers will be in the area, but like I said, the main weather picture and the main weather change is across the southern Gulf there. That's at 954 millibars, and this storm will rapidly intensify and move northward tonight, with that dropping to about 952 millibars by tomorrow. A wave of heavier rainfall is working up the eastern side of this. This will still be south of Haida Gwaii by a long shot, but by Tuesday night, a lot of the slug of moisture is going to move into the central and northern parts of southeast, combined with the cold that's in place. It sets the stage for a pretty good storm across the northern parts of the Panhandle, bringing us that opportunity for 12 to 26 inches of snow around the Haines and Skagway areas. South of that, again, it mainly looks to be wind. And as we watch this play out, you'll notice that front moving through really helps to stir that wind up as we go from Tuesday night and into early Wednesday morning. The center of low pressure is still just west and south of Prince William Sound at 952 millibars. Expect to see widespread storm force winds across the outer coast and even on the inside passages there. So if you've got travel plans or you're waiting on the ferry, you may be waiting just a little bit longer there. Conditions are going to be pretty rough on the inside there and into parts of Prince William Sound as well. Wind will be coming up across many of our passes, Thompson Pass and probably Moose Pass and Turnagain Pass. So if you've got travel plans on the Kenai, watch the weather carefully. We do expect to see some stronger northerly winds coming down Cook Inlet as well. That's going to make a lot of that ice move around quite a bit, and it's probably going to make things pretty uncomfortable across the Sterling Highway all the way down toward Homer and likely on the Parks Highway as you're driving around. So pay attention to the weather. There will be changes. And in the west, cold continues, the wind continues, wind chill advisories will likely continue into the midweek. Here's a look at some of the actual temperatures, not wind chills now, as we go into Tuesday morning. 30s for most of central and southern parts of southeast. Many areas will be above freezing tonight and early tomorrow. Teens and 20s for Prince William Sound. Temps anywhere from 0 to 10 below across Cook Inlet, 0 in Homer, 11 in Kodiak. Southwest, expect temps from 15 to about 25 below. Nome looking at 13 below. Utqiagvik, 20 to 25 below. Kaktovik, expect temps closer to 30 below. And Fort Yukon, 25 below. For Tuesday afternoon, we expect to see highs back in the mid-30s to even 40 degrees across some parts of the outer coast of southeast. That's all in advance of that snow. It will be cooling off quickly as we get into Tuesday night. Teens for South Central, just shy of 30 there in Kodiak, 0 for Port Heiden, and about 24 for Unalaska and Dutch Harbor. Fairbanks, 21 below and 22 below for Utqiagvik. Really not warming up very much by Wednesday.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Let's take a look at the aviation weather starting Tuesday morning. Scattered IFR conditions there in the coastal mountains of northern and central southeast, otherwise marginal conditions across the rest of the southeast, spreading into the North Gulf and down through the Alaska Peninsula, otherwise marginal conditions over much of the rest of the Alaska Peninsula and Aleutians, otherwise marginal and IFR conditions there in the eastern interior and North Slope. For Tuesday afternoon, marginal conditions across much of southeast Alaska, and that spreads out through the North Gulf and down through the Alaska Peninsula. With this low pressure system coming in, we're expecting degrading conditions with IFR conditions covering Kodiak Island. Otherwise, eastern interior and North Slope continue marginal to IFR conditions there. Wednesday morning, IFR conditions cover much of southeast Alaska, and that spreads through the North Gulf and down through Kodiak Island and across the Alaska Peninsula. Marginal conditions across portions of the eastern interior, Yukon River Valley, and portions of the North Slope. Improving conditions with increasing ceiling and visibility across southeast, but otherwise IFR conditions along the coastal mountains there. Marginal conditions spreading into the North Gulf. IFR conditions there in the Copper River Basin and down through portions of Kodiak Island, otherwise Alaska Peninsula, marginal to IFR conditions there. And again, the eastern interior with IFR and marginal conditions there, and North Slope as well. Past conditions on Tuesday, AKwx IFR to improving to marginal conditions. Adigan IFR during the entire day. Down Alaska Range, for the southern part of the Alaska Range, Lake Clark and Merrill, marginal to VFR conditions. Rainy IFR to VFR conditions, improving during the day. Windy, much the same, marginal conditions early with VFR by the end of the day, and Isabel, much the same, marginal to VFR. And Mentasta, VFR, marginal VFR to VFR. And Tanita, VFR conditions there during the entire day. Portage, looking at IFR conditions, improving slightly to marginal conditions there. And Chilkoot and White Pass, starting off the day with IFR conditions, improving slowly to marginal conditions. For the freezing levels down through the southeast, we're looking at some elevated freezing levels there in the southeast. Otherwise, the surface freezing level comes across the southeast and across the northern part of the Gulf, otherwise down through the Gulf and out through the Aleutians. With icy conditions, we're looking at, let's look at the southeast, below 5,000 feet over much of southeast Alaska and into Kodiak Island, with considerable moderate portions of Kodiak Island. Otherwise, between 2,000 and 5,000 feet out across the Aleutians. And looking at the jet stream, steering a lot of our systems here, a 165 knot wind across the northern Pacific, down through the continental United States with 100 knot winds there. Otherwise, 110 knots up through Alaska and into Canada and down through the ridge of high pressure, 55 knots there on the eastern side of that ridge of high pressure. 9,000 foot winds Tuesday, nice low in the Gulf there with 30 to 40 knot winds coming across the Panhandle and into the northern Gulf. Otherwise, much calmer conditions over the mainland with northerly winds down the west side of the Alaska mainland with 40 to 50 knots there, and there's that big high pressure out there in the western Aleutians. 9,000 foot winds, again that low pressure system, pretty weak winds there at 3,000 feet across the eastern interior. Otherwise, northerly winds 40 to 45 knots along the west slope, along the west coast, and again, weakening conditions as you get closer to that ridge. Turbulence for Tuesday, below 4,000 feet over much of the southeast. Otherwise, western Alaska below 2,000 feet there in Seward Peninsula, and below 4,000 feet across the western Brooks.
We have a big solar flare coming in, so we're out here on an Aurora hunt. It's a CME, it's dynamite, coronal mass ejection. It's when the sun, it kicks off energy and these explosions that are larger than the Earth, explosion type things coming off of sunspots. And if that energy is pointing straight at the Earth, it gets caught up in our magnetic field, and that energy, electrons, come down our magnetic field, collide with oxygen up there about 50 or a couple hundred miles high, and that's what generates the northern lights. My job as the photographer and the Aurora hunter is to be in position, location, location, location. And I like to think I'm composing. Mother Nature, it's a bit of a teamwork thing, she's got to put on the show, but I have to be in the right position and of course with the right tools and the know-how. I've stopped keeping track of how much time I spend out here in terms of hours. It's more in terms of weeks or months, or at this point years now. It was always in me. Even when I was a kid growing up in the lower 48, I would spend nights sleeping on our trampoline, just staring at the stars. I'm in 4th grade and I'm going, wow, look at those stars. And I'd see how many nights in a row I could sleep on the trampoline. And I think my record was 23 nights in a row. So I was doing kind of strange things for an Iowa country boy. I can remember specifically the very first time I saw the northern lights. It was 1989, the peak of the solar cycle, and I was going to graduate school in Laramie, Wyoming. And all of a sudden we had heard the northern lights were out. It's like, what are those? I'd never really seen them before. And my goodness gracious, we were on top of a mountain in the Laramie Range and they were turning blood red. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. And the very first picture I took, that was 1990. Now, an old film camera, Pentax K1000 on a plastic Kmart tripod. Took 2 shots on slide film and got them back. And I thought, oh my gosh, this beautiful green thing swirling about. And from that moment, I was hooked. When I realized that you could preserve the auroras on film, I just experimented a ton. I'd had a heaping stack of slides, the no good ones. The experiments gone wrong, too dark, fuzzy, out of focus, too light. I had this huge garbage can full of excess slide film, and that was just the learning curve. Well, when I go out here, it's all about getting the shot. And my wife and I, we've called it the hero shot. But the hero shot is the one where you just come home and you go, look at this. And everyone goes, wow, and you feel like a hero. It's a wonderful feeling, it's always It's good for the ego, of course. It's good for the business. But if you kind of strip that away, it's good for what's inside you, because that's really the hero moment in nature. And Mother Nature's putting on this show that is just mind-blowing. It's unbelievable. When I first resigned from my day job, that was in 1996, and decided I wanted to become a full-time Aurora hunter, my goal from that moment and to this day still is to get one hero shot a year. I figured, and I'm talking the kind that somebody wants to buy from you and hang on their wall, where the Auroras are extremely bright, very active, turning colors, where you can't believe your eyes. If you get to preserve a little sample of that with a photograph, well, it's what we call the hero shot. Wow, what a feeling. I mean, oh, you're elevated, levitating, you're lifted up. Your spirits are so high that I love that feeling. And I think I get that so much from seeing cool things in nature that I will go way out of my way to find that. And I can, the next day, well, I'll be just laying there thinking about it and thinking how lucky I was, or how fortunate. Of course, I just spent 2 weeks sitting there staring at the sky and not seeing anything, so you got to remember that luck is kind of a relative term, but I still just feel incredibly lucky to be even in a position to where I could have been there, taken a photograph of it, and just mainly experienced it. Well, that feeling could last for days.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back to Marine Weather. Let's take a look at the sea ice analysis. You can see the pack ice is slowly drifting south-southwestward, getting closer to St. Matthew Island there. You should be seeing pack ice there just off the coast. Also pack ice showing up in Bristol Bay area down through Point Hayden. Also, we have some pack ice, or pretty good ice conditions there in Cook Inlet. And we might also be cognizant of some ice coming out of the Kamishak Bay area and into Shelkoff Strait. Today's marine forecast for southeast, looking at the inside waters, we're looking at winds generally from a south southerly direction at 15 to 30. The Lynn Canal up there southerly at 20 knots. Otherwise, in the outside waters, winds generally from the south with gales out there in the outside waters up to 40 knots, 30 to 35 in the northern part of that basin. And then very strong conditions for Wednesday and southeast, with the outside waters gusting to 60 with near hurricane force there, and otherwise storm force conditions over much of the area with southerly winds up to 40 to 50 knots there. And the inside waters, we're looking at winds, again, generally from a southerly direction at 30 to 35 knots, gustier as you head into the Lynn Canal area. Mariners out in south central, look for winds generally from an easterly direction at 20 to 40 knots across much of this area. Cook Inlet, winds generally from the north 15 to 40. Watch for heavy freezing spray through the southern part of that Cook Inlet. Kamishak Bay, seas as high as 13 feet there. For south central on Wednesday, again, pretty good winds associated with the big low coming in to the Gulf. Winds generally in a counterclockwise direction, 40 knots, seas as high as 23 feet. Prince William Sound, northeasterly at 30 knots. And Cook Inlet, looking at winds generally from the north, 20 to 40 knots. Again, possible heavy freezing spray in portions of this whole area. Alaska Peninsula and Kodiak Island for Tuesday, winds generally from a again, that counterclockwise flow around that low. Winds generally from a north or northeasterly direction, 30 to 40 knots, seas as high as 11 feet. On the south side of the peninsula, winds generally from a northerly direction, 35 knots. On the north side, gale winds up there on the north side with up to 35 knots. Bristol Bay area, 25 knots out of the north. For the Alaska Peninsula, Kodiak Island, for Wednesday, winds turn around a little bit to the northwesterly direction, 30 to 40 knots, seas as high as 19 to 20 feet here. Otherwise, on the northerly side, on the north side of the Alaska Peninsula, winds generally from the northwest of 14, near storm force winds there. Otherwise, seas as high as 18 feet. For loosened chain on Tuesday, looking at winds generally from a northeasterly direction, gales out there, 30 to 35 knots, seas as high as 17 feet, just south of Atka and Adak. Otherwise, winds generally from a east or northeast direction, 30 to 35 knots out there in the western Aleutians. For Wednesday, winds generally from the north, gales 30 to 35 knots. Out on the western Aleutians, winds generally from a west or north direction, 20 knots. West coast, winds generally from a north along the pack ice, 20 to 25 knots. Out along the ice edge there, gales 30 to 35 knots, seas as high as 11 feet there near the Pribs. And west coast for Wednesday, winds generally from the north, 25 knots, north or northwest, 25 through Norton Sound and down through just off the Kuskokwim Bay. Out on the pack ice, just off the edge, northerly 20 to 40 knots there, seas as high as 14 feet near the Pribs. For the Arctic coast, Beaufort Sea, winds generally from a west at 10 knots down through the northwest coast and down through the Bering Strait. Winds generally from 10 to 25 knots out of the northerly direction. And for Wednesday, winds generally from the north 5 to 10 along the Arctic coast, northwest coast 10 to 25 knots, generally from a northerly direction. Tonight's weather, looking at a strong low pressure system moving into the Gulf with on Tuesday, there it is, the big system moving in to expect rain and snow showers across the region.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.